Hey everyone, it's time again to recap the latest news from the solar PV industry compiled by the American Solar Energy Society. I'm Jay Warmke with SolarPVTraining.com, and this is what's happening in the wonderful world of solar for the week of June 29th. The U.S. Senate released a draft of their changes to the budget reconciliation bill last Friday night, and all indications are that the final bill will be very bad for the solar industry. The Senate changed language so that utility-scale projects would have to be placed in service by the year-end 2027 in order to get incentives. The original draft had allowed 100% credit as long as the construction had started by the end of 2025. The Senate also appears to have approved the House's recommendation that residential sale tax credits expire at the end of 2025. And perhaps most surprisingly, a new tax on solar energy appears to have been invented. The Senate's draft states that any projects that start construction before 2035 would have to abide by the Foreign Entity of Concern clause or be subject to a 50% tax. In other words, if a project uses any component that has any association with China, it would have to pay a 50% tax on all energy produced. The American Clean Power Association reacted, saying that with no warning, the Senate has proposed new language that would increase taxes on domestic energy production. These new taxes will strand hundreds of billions of dollars in current investments, threaten energy security, undermine growth of domestic manufacturing, and land hardest on rural communities who would have been the greatest beneficiaries of the clean energy investment. And perhaps putting a line under these concerns, a new report released Monday by clean energy nonprofits E2 and Clean Economy Tracker stated that companies canceled $1.4 billion in new clean energy factories and projects in May of this year as congressional Republicans worked through the reconciliation bill, expected to dramatically pare down clean energy incentives. Since the beginning of this year, nearly $15.5 billion in new factories and energy projects have been canceled, according to the report. The majority of these investments are located in Republican-held congressional districts where $9 billion worth of planned investments have been canceled. Monday's report found that 30 projects have been canceled, closed, or downsized since the beginning of this year. With renewable energy supplying more than 90% of all new electricity in America last year, canceled projects will likely mean less available energy and higher electrical prices for consumers and businesses, just as electrical demand is expected to soar over the next several years. Ireland has become the sixth European country to end its use of coal in generating electricity, with its scheduled shutdown of the Money Point coal-fired power plant 6 months earlier than originally planned. It joins Portugal, the UK, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Austria, Albania, and Switzerland as nations within Europe who do not operate any coal power plants within their borders. 10 other nations, including Italy, Spain, and France, are set to shut down their remaining coal-fired power plants in the coming month. Last year, Europe obtained less than 10% of their electricity from coal for the first time in history. In comparison, the continent obtained about 47% of its electricity from renewable sources. The U.S. demand for residential off-grid plus solar plus storage systems is rising faster than on-grid demand, albeit from a far smaller sales base, according to recent industry reports. The compounded annual growth rate of off-grid solar is 7 to 10%, while grid-tied solar is 6% or less. Well, part of the off-grid market is composed of truly off-grid situations like remote housing where there is no physical connection to the grid. Increasingly, more and more utility customers are opting to go off-grid. Rapidly rising utility costs, increased connection charges from the utilities, reduced net metering compensation, and long delays in interconnection approvals are reasons as cited for this trend. A study funded by Thompson Endowment found that grid-tied utility costs in 5 states actually make it cheaper to go off-grid than to remain connected. Hawaii, California, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire were identified as prime off-grid savings versus grid-tied savings, with electric costs in some cities resulting in a 6-year return on investment for a standard off-grid installation. Renewable energy sources generated nearly 1/3 of the total U.S. electrical generation in April of this year, with solar providing over 10% of total national electrical output, according to recent data from the Energy Information Administration. EIA's latest monthly report, Electrical Power Monthly, which has data through April 30th of this year, confirms that solar continues to be the fastest growing new source of U.S. electricity. Electrical generation by a combination of all renewables in just the month of April reached a new record and provided almost 1/3, or 32.8%, of the total U.S. generation. Renewables are now approaching the generation share provided by natural gas at 35.1%, whose electrical output actually dropped 4.4% during that month. In April alone, electrical generation by utility-scale solar projects, which are greater than 1 megawatt, increased by 39.3%, while estimated small-scale rooftop projects increased by 11.8%. Combined, they grew by 31.3% and provided 10.7% of the nation's electrical output. And that is the news from the solar industry for this week. We'll see you next week.